The dusty street of Silverwater Creek ran red with blood as Zachariah Stone staggered toward the only lit window in town, clutching his side where the bullet had torn through flesh and muscle. The year was 1876, and justice in the Arizona Territory came swift and brutal to those who stood on the wrong side of a gun. Eleanor O'Malley couldn't sleep, not with the summer heat pressing against her small homestead like an unwelcome guest. She'd left Kansas City behind 3 months prior, traveling west after her father's passing left her with nothing but debts and a single skill, her healing touch. The frontier town needed a midwife, and Eleanor needed a fresh start. The pounding at her door startled her from her sleepless contemplation. She clutched her nightgown close, hesitating before approaching the door. Silverwater Creek wasn't known for nighttime social calls. "Please," came a ragged voice. "Help me." Something in the desperation pierced Eleanor's caution. She unlatched the door, gasping as a man collapsed across her threshold, his trail clothes stained dark with blood. "Good Lord," she whispered, kneeling beside him. His face was handsome despite the pain etched across its strong jawline darkened by stubble, eyes the color of a stormy sky. "What happened to you?" "Ambushed," he managed through gritted teeth. 5 miles out, they took everything." Eleanor helped him to the small cot in the corner of her one-room cabin. "Let me see." She gently pried his hands from the wound, wincing at the amount of blood soaking his shirt. "You've been shot." "Notice that," he replied with a grimace that might have been intended as a smile. Eleanor worked quickly, cutting away his shirt with kitchen shears. The bullet had gone clean through his side, missing vital organs but leaving a messy exit wound. It was his hands that concerned her most. They were slashed deeply across the palms, as if he'd grabbed a blade. "These need tending," she said, examining his shaking hands. "You've lost too much blood." "The horse," he mumbled, his consciousness fading. "Stole my horse." "Hush now," Eleanor soothed. "Your horse isn't my concern." The cowboy's hands shook from blood loss. She wrapped them in her apron and prayed quietly. Not formal prayers from church, but desperate whispers to whoever might be listening. She couldn't let this stranger die on her floor, not when she had the knowledge to save him. Eleanor worked through the night. She cleaned and stitched the bullet wound first, grateful that it hadn't splintered any bones. His hands required more delicate attention, deep lacerations across both palms that would need time to heal properly. By the time the first rays of dawn crept through her window, she had bandaged all his wounds and coaxed some water between his lips. His fever broke just after sunrise. Eleanor replaced the damp cloth on his forehead, studying his face. He couldn't be much older than her 23 years. His features were strong, weathered by sun and wind. He stirred under her gaze, eyes fluttering open. "Am I dead?" he asked, voice rough. "Not yet, though it wasn't for lack of trying," Eleanor replied. "I'm Eleanor O'Malley, the town midwife." "Zachariah Stone," he said, attempting to sit up before wincing sharply. "Most folks call me Zach." "Well, Mr. Stone, you need to lie still. You've lost a lot of blood." He glanced down at his bandaged hands. "You saved my life. Don't thank me yet. You've got a long recovery ahead." Eleanor rose to fetch him water. "Care to tell me what happened?" Zachariah's expression darkened. "Was riding back from Tucson. Had a good run at the poker tables." He paused, swallowing painfully. "3 men ambushed me near the creek crossing. Took my winnings, my horse. Would have taken my life if I hadn't fought back. And your hands," one had a knife. "I grabbed the blade." His mouth twisted in a wry smile. "Not my wisest decision." Eleanor shook her head. "Those hands will need time to heal. You won't be holding reins or cards for a while." "I don't have a while, Miss O'Malley." He shifted uncomfortably. "Those men took everything I had. Then it's fortunate you landed on my doorstep. Eleanor handed him a cup of water. I need help around here and you need time to heal. We can help each other. Zachariah studied her face. What kind of help does a midwife need? The practical kind. My roof leaks, my vegetable garden needs tending, and I've got a stack of firewood that won't chop itself come winter. She smiled slightly. Once your hands heal, of course. He laughed, then immediately regretted it, clutching his side. You drive a hard bargain, Miss O'Malley. Eleanor, she corrected. And it's not a bargain, it's survival. That's how it works out here. For the next week, Zachariah drifted between fevered sleep and lucid moments. Eleanor continued her duties in town, returning to change his bandages and prepare simple meals. She learned he was a drifter who'd spent the last 5 years moving from town to town, working ranches when necessary, but preferring the freedom of the open trail. You're not an outlaw, are you? She asked one evening as she checked his stitches. Would I tell you if I was? His eyes crinkled with amusement. I'd hope so, considering I saved your life. Zachariah's smile faded. No, not an outlaw, just a man who hasn't found a reason to stay anywhere too long. By the second week, he could sit up without pain, though his hands remained heavily bandaged. Eleanor taught him simple tasks he could manage, sorting her dried herbs, preparing simple tinctures. His presence changed her small home in ways she hadn't anticipated. The silence she'd grown accustomed to was replaced by conversation, by another person's breathing. Why Silverwater Creek? He asked one evening as they shared a simple stew. Doesn't seem like much of a place for a young woman alone. Eleanor stirred her stew thoughtfully. My father died last winter, left nothing but debts. I saw an advertisement that this town needed medical help, especially for women. She shrugged. I had training from my grandmother who was a midwife back east. It seemed as good a direction as any. It's a rough place. Life is rough everywhere, Mr. Stone. At least here I'm needed. He nodded slowly. You certainly were when I came knocking. 3 weeks after his arrival, Sheriff Thomas Mills paid Eleanor a visit. He was a burly man with a perpetually suspicious nature, and his gaze lingered on Zachariah, who was sitting outside on her small porch. Miss O'Malley, the sheriff greeted stiffly. I hear you've been harboring a stranger. Healing a stranger, Eleanor corrected. Zachariah Stone was shot and robbed on the trail into town. And you didn't think to report this to me. My concern was keeping him alive, Sheriff. Once he was stable, he told me what happened. Mills turned his attention to Zachariah. You get a good look at who did this to you. 3 men. One tall and thin with a scar along his jaw. Another shorter, heavyset with a red beard. Third was young, maybe 20, with blonde hair. Zachariah's voice was steady. They were riding north when they ambushed me. The sheriff's expression changed. The Ryder brothers and their cousin. They've been causing trouble up and down the territory. He stroked his mustache thoughtfully. They took your horse, you say, Palomino stallion with a white blaze, name's Ranger. I'll keep an eye out. Mills turned back to Eleanor. How long do you plan on keeping him here, Miss O'Malley? Eleanor lifted her chin. Until he's healed, Sheriff. That's what healers do. After the sheriff left, Eleanor noticed Zachariah watching her with an unreadable expression. What? She asked. You stood up to him. Not everyone would do that for a stranger. You're not exactly a stranger anymore, she replied. And I don't like being told how to conduct my business. As the weeks passed, Eleanor found herself looking forward to returning home each day. Zachariah proved to be good company, full of stories from his travels. He began taking on small chores as his side healed, though his hands remained tender. Eleanor was careful to change his bandages daily, applying a salve of her own making. You have a gift, he told her one evening as she examined his healing palms. The cuts were closing nicely, though the scars would remain. My grandmother taught me that healing isn't just about knowing which herbs to use. Eleanor gently rewrapped his right hand. It's about intention. She said a healer's hands carry their own medicine. Is that why you pray? He asked quietly. When you're tending to people, Eleanor looked up, surprised. You heard me. That first night, you were praying over my hands. She blushed slightly. It's a habit. Grandmother always said prayers couldn't hurt and might help. I think they did. His voice was soft. Help, I mean. The moment stretched between them, filled with something Eleanor couldn't name. She cleared her throat and finished bandaging his left hand. You should be able to use them more tomorrow, she said practically. Small tasks only. By the time July heat settled over the town, Zachariah was helping Eleanor with her garden each morning before the worst of the day's temperature hit. His side had healed completely, and his hands, while scarred, had regained most of their strength. Eleanor knew he would leave soon. Men like him didn't stay in one place, but she pushed the thought away each time it surfaced. One evening, Eleanor returned from delivering Mrs. Peterson's baby to find Zachariah had prepared dinner. The simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee was waiting on the table, and he'd even found a wildflower to place in a small jar. What's the occasion? She asked, touched by the gesture. Thought you might be tired after bringing another life into this world. He pulled out her chair. Sit, eat. As they shared the meal, Eleanor noticed something different about him, a nervous energy she hadn't seen before. Is everything all right? She finally asked. Zachariah set down his fork. I went into town today. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Here it was he was leaving. Oh. Sheriff Mills had some news. They caught 2 of the men who attacked me. The Ryder brothers were arrested in Flagstaff. He hesitated. They still had Ranger. That's wonderful, Eleanor exclaimed. You'll have your horse back. Yes. His eyes held hers. Which means I could leave. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor fought to keep her expression neutral. Of course, you're fully healed now. There's nothing keeping you here. Isn't there? Zachariah's voice was soft. Eleanor's heart quickened. What do you mean? I've been thinking a lot about what you said about finding a place where you're needed. He reached across the table, his scarred hand covering hers. I've never been needed anywhere, Eleanor. Not until here. Zachariah, I know we haven't known each other long, he continued, but these past weeks, they've meant something to me. You've meant something. Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. You're just grateful because I saved your life. No. His grip on her hand firmed. It's more than gratitude. Much more. Before Eleanor could respond, frantic knocking interrupted them. She rose quickly, opening the door to find young Billy Jenkins, the stablemaster's son. Miss O'Malley. Pa says come quick. It's Mrs. Wilson, the baby's coming too early. Eleanor grabbed her midwifery bag. Tell your father I'm on my way. She turned to Zachariah. I have to go, he nodded. We'll finish this conversation later. The Wilson baby arrived before dawn, tiny but strong, lunged. Eleanor stayed through the night and into the morning, ensuring both mother and child were stable before making her weary way home. She found Zachariah sitting on the porch, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. Sheriff Mills came by, he said without preamble. The 3rd man who attacked me, the cousin, has been spotted near town. Eleanor's exhaustion evaporated. Here. Why would he come here? Revenge, most likely. The Ryder brothers will hang for killing a mail carrier last month. He probably blames me for their capture. Zachariah stood, his expression grim. I need to leave, Eleanor. What? The word came out sharper than she intended. You can't just, I'm putting you in danger by staying, he interrupted. These men aren't the forgiving type. If he knows I'm here, he'll come after me and anyone close to me. So you're running. Eleanor felt anger rising through her fatigue. After everything you said last night, Zachariah stepped closer, his eyes pained. "I meant every word. That's why I have to go. I won't risk your safety." "That's not your decision to make," Eleanor countered. "This is my home. My life." "Eleanor, no," she cut him off firmly. "I've spent my whole life watching people leave. My mother died when I was 12. My father buried himself in work and drink. I came west because there was nothing left for me back east." Her voice trembled slightly. "I won't watch you leave too. Not without a fight." Zachariah stared at her for a long moment. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we face this together," Eleanor replied. "I'm saying what happens next should be our decision, not one you make alone because you think you're protecting me." His expression softened. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "You haven't met many women then," she retorted, which made him laugh despite the situation. "All right," he conceded. "Together then, but we need a plan." They spent the day preparing. Zachariah cleaned and checked the revolver he'd been carrying when he was attacked. Eleanor packed supplies they might need if they had to leave quickly. By unspoken agreement, they avoided continuing their interrupted conversation from the previous night. There would be time for that after the danger had passed. Night fell without incident. Eleanor, exhausted from being awake for nearly 2 days, finally succumbed to sleep. Zachariah insisted on keeping watch, promising to wake her in a few hours to take her turn. The sound of breaking glass jerked Eleanor from deep sleep. The cabin was dark, the fire reduced to embers. She reached for Zachariah and found the space beside her empty. "Zach," she whispered. A scuffling noise came from outside, followed by a pained grunt. Eleanor's heart raced as she fumbled for the rifle Zachariah had placed under the bed. Her fingers closed around the cool metal just as the door burst open. A figure silhouetted against the night sky pointed a gun directly at her. "Where is he?" Eleanor recognized the voice immediately. Jed Wilson, Mrs. Wilson's brother-in-law, a man she treated for a broken arm just last month. "Jed," she kept the rifle pointed at him. "What are you doing?" "Looking for that man you've been hiding," Jed snarled. "The one who identified my cousins." Eleanor's mind raced. Jed Wilson was related to the Riders. How had they not known? "Lower your weapon," she said as calmly as she could. "Let's talk about this." "Nothing to talk about," Jed replied. "Family is family. Your friend cost me mine." "Your cousins are murderers, Jed," Eleanor said carefully. "They killed a mail carrier." "That was an accident." Jed's hand trembled slightly. "They didn't mean to kill nobody." Eleanor took a cautious step forward. "And what about you? Are you planning to kill someone tonight?" Confusion crossed Jed's face. "I just want him. Stone. He's the reason they're going to hang." "No," came Zachariah's voice from the doorway. "They're the reason they're going to hang." Jed whirled, firing wildly. The bullet splintered wood near Zachariah's head as he dove to the side. Eleanor raised her rifle and fired, the shot going wide but startling Jed enough that Zachariah could tackle him to the ground. The two men struggled, Jed's gun discharging again into the ceiling. Eleanor watched in horror as they fought, unsure how to help without risking hitting Zachariah. Then Jed pulled a knife, the same flash of steel that had cut Zachariah's hands all those weeks ago. "Zach!" she cried in warning. Zachariah caught Jed's wrist just as the blade descended toward his chest. For a moment, they were locked in a deadly contest of strength. Then, with a roar of effort, Zachariah twisted Jed's arm and drove the knife into the floorboards. A solid punch rendered Jed unconscious. Zachariah sat back, breathing heavily. "Are you hurt?" Eleanor rushed to his side. "No," he assured her, though she noticed he was cradling his right hand. "But I think I might have reopened one of these scars." The commotion had alerted the neighbors. Soon, Sheriff Mills arrived to take Jed into custody, promising he'd face justice alongside his cousins. "You two have a knack for finding trouble," Mills commented as his deputy led Jed away. Trouble found us, Zachariah replied, his arm protectively around Eleanor's shoulders. When they were finally alone again, Eleanor examined Zachariah's hand by lamplight. The scar had indeed reopened, though not severely. "This will need to be cleaned and wrapped again," she said, her voice still shaky from the night's events. "Eleanor." His other hand gently tilted her chin up. "Look at me." She met his gaze, seeing in it everything they hadn't said. "I'm not leaving," he said simply. "Not now." "Not ever if you'll have me." Eleanor's breath caught. "What are you saying, Zachariah Stone?" "I'm saying that when a man finds something worth staying for, he'd be a fool to ride away from it." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I'm saying I love you, Eleanor O'Malley. I think I've loved you since you wrapped my hands in your apron and prayed over me like I was worth saving." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. "I was so afraid you'd leave once you were healed." "I almost did," he admitted. "Not because I wanted to, but because it's all I've known." Moving on before anything could matter too much. His scarred hand found hers. "But you matter, Eleanor, more than I can say." Eleanor raised herself on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with all the emotion of the past weeks, the fear, the healing, the growing love neither had been brave enough to name until now. When they finally parted, Eleanor whispered against his lips, "I love you too." They were married 2 weeks later in Silverwater Creek's small church. Eleanor wore a simple blue dress with wildflowers in her hair. Zachariah, dressed in a new shirt and the cleanest pair of denims he owned, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him. Sheriff Mills stood as witness alongside Mrs. Wilson, who insisted on attending despite her new baby being barely a month old. "Couldn't miss seeing the midwife get herself hitched," she declared cheerfully. With the money recovered from the Ryder brothers, Zachariah purchased a small parcel of land just outside town. It wasn't much, 10 acres with a dilapidated cabin and a small creek running through one corner, but it was theirs. "What do you think?" he asked as they stood on their property the day after the wedding. "It needs work, but it's perfect," Eleanor interrupted, her eyes shining. "Our own place. I thought we could fix up the cabin, maybe expand it a bit, plant some crops come spring." Zachariah's arm tightened around her waist. "I know it's not much for a woman who gave up a city life," Eleanor silenced him with a kiss. "This is exactly the life I want, with you." Over the following months, they built their home together. Zachariah's skills as a carpenter, learned during his years of drifting from job to job, proved invaluable. Eleanor continued her work as a midwife, her reputation growing throughout the county. They added a proper bedroom to the cabin, a larger kitchen, and a covered porch where they could sit in the evenings, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. Word of Eleanor's healing abilities spread, bringing people from neighboring settlements seeking her remedies and care. Zachariah built her a small outbuilding where she could treat patients and store her growing collection of medicines and herbs. "You found your calling," he told her one evening as they sat on their porch, her head resting on his shoulder. "We both have," she replied, lacing her fingers through his. The scars on his palms had faded to silvery lines, visible reminders of the night that had brought them together. In the spring of 1878, their daughter was born, a strong, lunged girl with her father's stormy eyes and her mother's determined chin. They named her Hope, a testament to what had saved them both. "She's perfect," Zachariah whispered, cradling the infant in his scarred hands with a tenderness that made Eleanor's heart swell. "She is," Eleanor agreed, "and she's going to be just as stubborn as her father." Zachariah laughed. "If she's half as stubborn as her mother, we're in for a challenge." Life wasn't always easy. The Arizona Territory could be harsh and unforgiving. There were drought years when their crops struggled and cold winters when sickness swept through the town. But they faced each challenge together, their bond strengthening with each passing season. By 1880, their homestead had expanded to include a small orchard, a vegetable garden that was the envy of the county, and a proper stable where Ranger resided alongside 2 mares and a stubborn old mule that Zachariah had rescued from a traveling merchant. Hope grew into a curious, adventurous child who trailed after her father in the fields and assisted her mother with simple healing tasks. "She has the gift," Eleanor often remarked, watching their daughter's gentle way with injured animals and ailing neighbors. On the evening of their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachariah surprised Eleanor with a gift, a proper doctor's bag made of fine leather, her initials stamped in gold on the side. "Ordered it all the way from San Francisco," he said proudly, as she ran her fingers over the smooth leather. "Figured the best healer in the territory deserves better than that cloth satchel you've been carrying." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful, Zach. Not as beautiful as you." He pulled her close, his hand still bearing the scars of their first meeting gentle against her back. "5 years, and I still can't believe my luck that I stumbled to your door that night." "It wasn't luck," Eleanor said softly. "It was fate." That night, after Hope was asleep, they sat on their porch in the comfortable silence of a couple who no longer needed words to communicate their deepest feelings. The stars spread across the desert sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "You ever miss it?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "The drifting, I mean, the freedom of not being tied to one place." Zachariah considered the question seriously, as he did all things. "Sometimes I miss the open sky," he admitted, "the not knowing what's over the next ridge." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "But I found something better than freedom, Eleanor. I found belonging." She leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "I never thought I'd find this," she confessed. "A home that feels right, someone who stays." "Wild horses couldn't drag me away," he promised, kissing the top of her head. In the autumn of 1881, their son was born, a quiet, thoughtful baby they named Samuel, after Eleanor's father. Hope, now 3, appointed herself his special protector, refusing to let anyone but her parents hold her baby brother without her supervision. "She gets that protective streak from you," Zachariah teased Eleanor as they watched Hope instructing Sheriff Mills on the proper way to hold little Samuel. "Me?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Who was it that nearly got into a fistfight with Mr. Peterson when he suggested Hope was too small for her age?" "The man's an idiot," Zachariah grumbled, though his eyes danced with humor. "Our daughter is perfect." As the children grew, so did their homestead. Zachariah's reputation as a fair businessman and skilled rancher brought opportunities. By 1883, they'd acquired the adjacent property, expanding their land to 30 acres. They raised cattle and horses, grew crops, and built a life richer than either had imagined possible. Eleanor's healing practice continued to thrive. She'd trained 2 young women from town as assistants, passing on the knowledge her grandmother had shared with her. The small outbuilding had been replaced by a proper clinic, where Eleanor treated everything from minor injuries to serious illnesses. "Dr. Wilson says you've saved more lives than he has," Zachariah told her one night as they prepared for bed. "Says he's thinking of retiring and leaving the doctoring to you officially." Eleanor smiled, brushing her hair at the vanity Zachariah had built her. "Dr. Wilson has been thinking of retiring for 3 years now. Besides, I'm not a doctor, just a midwife with some extra knowledge." "You're more than that," Zachariah insisted, coming to stand behind her. His hands, still bearing the scars from their first meeting, rested on her shoulders. "You're a healer, Eleanor, Always have been. She reached up to cover his hand with hers, their eyes meeting in the mirror's reflection. We healed each other, I think. The years passed, marking their lives with joys and sorrows alike. They lost friends to illness and accident, welcomed new neighbors, celebrated marriages and births. Through it all, their bond remained unbreakable, forged in that desperate night when a wounded cowboy collapsed at a lonely midwife's door. In the summer of 1886, as they celebrated 10 years of marriage, Zachariah took Eleanor riding to their special place, a small mesa overlooking their land, where wildflowers grew in profusion despite the desert heat. "Look at what we've built," he said, gesturing to the view below. Their homestead sprawled peacefully in the afternoon sun, the main house, now expanded to accommodate their growing family, the barn and stables, Eleanor's clinic, the bunkhouse for the 2 ranch hands they employed, and fields of crops stretching toward the horizon. "It's amazing," Eleanor agreed, leaning against him. At 33, she was still as beautiful to him as she'd been at 23, though silver now threaded through her dark hair and laugh lines crinkled at the corners of her eyes. "Remember what you told me that first week when I was still laid up in your cabin?" Zachariah asked. Eleanor smiled. "I told you many things that week, most of them instructions to stay still and stop reopening your wounds," he laughed. "You said life is rough everywhere, but at least here, you were needed." His arms encircled her waist. "I never knew how much I needed to be needed until I met you. And I never knew how much I needed someone who would stay," she replied softly. That evening, their children gathered around the dinner table. Hope, now 8 and showing signs of her mother's healing touch. Samuel, 5 and already mimicking his father's quiet strength. And little Rebecca, just turned 2, a surprise blessing in their lives. "Tell us the story again, Pa," Hope requested as they finished the meal. "About how you and Ma met." Zachariah caught Eleanor's eye across the table, both of them smiling at the often requested tale. "Well," he began, settling back in his chair, "it was a dark night and I was in a bad way." He told the story as he always did, editing the more frightening details for the children's sake, but always emphasizing the courage of their mother, who had taken in a stranger and saved his life. "And the cowboy's hands shook from blood loss," he continued, holding out his scarred palms for the children to see. "She wrapped them in her apron and prayed quietly. And then you fell in love," Hope concluded with the satisfaction of a child who knows the ending of a favorite story. "Not right away," Eleanor corrected with a smile. "First, your father had to heal and I had to learn to trust him. But you did fall in love," Samuel insisted, his young face serious. "Yes," Zachariah confirmed, reaching across the table to take Eleanor's hand. "We did. And that's how we got all of you, and this ranch, and this life we've built together." Later, after the children were asleep, Eleanor and Zachariah sat on their porch swing, a blanket draped across their laps against the cooling night air. The same stars that had witnessed their beginning continued their eternal dance overhead. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been ambushed that night?" Eleanor asked, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder. "If you'd made it to town without incident?" Zachariah considered this. "I'd likely have stayed a night or two, then moved on. That was my way back then." His arm tightened around her, "And I'd have missed everything that matters." "Everything, everything," he confirmed. "You, the children, this home, purpose, belonging." He kissed her temples softly. "I thought freedom meant not being tied to anyone or anything. I was wrong. True freedom came when I stopped running." Eleanor smiled, lifting her face to his. "Then I'm glad you stumbled to my door that night, Zachariah Stone, even if it did involve you getting shot." "Best thing that ever happened to me," he agreed, and kissed her under the vast Arizona sky, their love as enduring as the land that had brought them together. In the years that followed, Silverwater Creek grew from a struggling frontier settlement into a proper town. A railroad spur brought increased commerce and new settlers. The Stone Ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. Eleanor's clinic expanded into a small hospital, where she trained a new generation of healers in both traditional and modern medical practices. Their children grew tall and strong, each finding their own path. Hope followed in her mother's footsteps, studying medicine in San Francisco before returning to practice alongside Eleanor. Samuel took to ranching with his father's quiet dedication, introducing new breeding techniques that improved their stock. Rebecca, their youngest, developed an unexpected talent for business, eventually taking over management of the ranch's finances and expanding their operations. Through it all, Zachariah and Eleanor remained the heart of the family, their love story becoming something of a legend in the territory, the wounded cowboy and the brave midwife, who had built a dynasty from desperate beginnings. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate. Zachariah, his dark hair now liberally streaked with silver, stood beside Eleanor on the porch of the home they'd built together. 25 years ago, he addressed the assembled family, his voice still strong despite his 55 years. I thought I was dying. I'd been shot, robbed, and left for dead on the trail. He looked down at Eleanor, his eyes filled with the same devotion that had sustained them through a quarter century. Instead, I found life. Real life, not just survival. Eleanor squeezed his hand, her heart full to bursting. We found it together, she corrected gently. As twilight settled over the land they'd tamed together, Zachariah led Eleanor away from the celebration to the old mesa where they'd often escaped for moments of privacy throughout their marriage. The wildflowers still bloomed there, persistent against the harsh desert conditions. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. Been working on it for months. He handed her a small wooden box carved with intricate patterns of healing herbs, lavender, sage, rosemary, the plants she'd used to save his life and countless others over the years. Inside lay a delicate silver pendant, a pair of hands cupped together as if in prayer. Oh, Zach, Eleanor breathed, lifting it from the box. It's beautiful. Turn it over, he urged. On the back, engraved in tiny, perfect script, were the words that had defined their beginning. She wrapped them in her apron and prayed. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. You remembered the exact words. I remember everything about that night, Zachariah said softly, helping her fasten the necklace. The pain, the fear, the way your hands felt when you tended my wounds. His fingers brushed her cheek. Mostly, I remember thinking that if I survived, I'd never take another day for granted. Have you? She asked, leaning into his touch. Taken days for granted, I mean. Not one, he promised. Not a single day with you could ever be ordinary, Eleanor. As the stars appeared overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their beginning, they held each other close. Two souls who had found in each other not just love, but redemption, purpose, and the truest freedom of all. The freedom to belong completely to another heart. 25 years, Eleanor mused. It seems impossible. And yet not nearly enough, Zachariah replied. I want 25 more at least. She laughed, the sound as dear to him now as it had been when he first heard it. Always greedy for more, aren't you? Only with you, he admitted. Only ever with you. As they made their way back to the celebration, hand in hand under the vast Arizona sky, both knew with absolute certainty that while their story had begun with blood and pain and desperate prayers, it would continue with the legacy they'd built together, a legacy of healing, of home, and of a love strong enough to transform two lonely souls into the heart of a family that would endure long after they were gone. And in the years to come, when their grandchildren asked for the story of how it all began, they would always start with the same words. The cowboy's hands shook from blood loss. She wrapped them in her apron and prayed quietly. The beginning of a love story that had changed everything.